guys, how's it going? So, welcome back to my fantasy matchup series, and today we're going to talk about Floyd Money Mayweather Jr., or Floyd Pretty Boy Mayweather Jr., versus Sugar Ray Leonard. And we're going to talk about what would happen if they fought. So, I'm going to treat this like as if it's a prime versus prime type of fight, you know what I mean? And, that's how we're going to sort of treat it. And the reason I wanted to talk about this fight in particular, because I think stylistically, it's a very interesting matchup. You know what I mean? I think this is a fight of pure offense versus pure defense, and I think that's what makes it really interesting. Because it depends, like whichever sort of style you think is would trump the other or whatever, then that's the style that would you think would win in this particular matchup, right? So I'll talk about both guys. So Sugar Ray Leonard, obviously, people who know me know that I've been a huge fan of this guy. You know what I mean? I think he's one of the best, if not the best welterweight in boxing history. And in all honesty, I do think he's the fastest puncher in the welterweight history of boxing, right? You know what I mean? Just his the way he was able to land these wide hooks and like uppercuts, was like crazy to me. When I watched this guy's fights. I mean, he was one of the guys who I've studied. Um, when I was first a fan of boxing, right? I remember one of my coaches told me to, if I wanted to like research a fighter or study some good fighters, then like he listed a bunch of names, and Ray Leonard was one of those names. And you know just looking back at this guy's fights, I've always just been a fan of his. And I mean, obviously he's not in my generation of boxing, right? Like I'm not saying I watched this guy fight live or anything like that, but I'm just saying in terms of like researching and um, sort of looking at his fights on YouTube and stuff. I've just been a huge fan of his in that aspect. So um, that's sort of how I see Ray Leonard. Now, in terms of Floyd Mayweather Jr., I mean, he's a bit of a, yeah, I don't want to say like a hated, no, excuse me, a hated character, but he's like, I guess, controversial. Some people love him, some people hate him. I personally don't feel either way about him. I kind of, a lot of people just like really dislike him because of his attitude at times, but I'm just like, I can kind of see past that. You know what I mean? I just appreciate him as a fighter because he's actually like, regardless of what you think of him, he's actually a good fighter. Like he's got incredible defense. In fact, he's probably the best at using his Philly shell. I don't think he's the best defensive fighter in boxing history, but in terms of his division, there could be an argument made for that, right? He's also a very good counterpuncher as well, which is a thing that obviously he's known for in boxing and his division. And, overall, like, a lot of people like really dislike this guy. Although at the same time, I guess people do like really like this guy as well. So, but my point is that I don't love him, I don't hate him, you know what I mean, or anything like that. I just, I can just appreciate his, career and his fighting, his overall fighting style. Just like I think many people should. So, yeah, that being said, we'll talk about sort of how this fight, would go down and how, like, what each fighter would bring into this fight. So, like I said, this is a fight of offense versus defense. Mayweather's got the defense, and Sugar Ray Leonard's got the offense. You know what I mean? Now, Mayweather hasn't really fought anyone like Ray Leonard in the past. He's fought guys who are maybe similar in height and somewhat similar in hand speed, which I'll get into later. But, in terms of like that specific style, he's never really, in my opinion, fought anyone, ridiculously close to Ray Leonard or anything. And same thing goes with Ray Leonard. Leonard's never really fought anyone who was close to Mayweather Jr. in terms of styles. I mean, I know he fought his dad, right? Like, he fought Mayweather Sr. and beat him, but they're different fighters, in my opinion, right? And I don't know, I wouldn't buy too much into that or take too much out of that, is what I'm saying. So, That's what I mean by that. Um, but in terms of, guys he's fought maybe who are like a bit similar, I think if I had to say anyone was similar to him, I'd say maybe Hearns, just because they had a similar way of, throwing that right hand of theirs, right? Um, I mean, yeah, Hearns I'd say is a better right hand, right? And it probably punches harder with that right hand, but and Mayweather's a bit different in that he's more of like he counter punches with that right hand as he's fighting backwards and uses it a bit differently. But that's like the closest I can think of in terms of who would be similar to Floyd Mayweather that Ray Leonard's fought, right? Now, in terms of Mayweather himself, who he's fought, who seems to be a bit similar to Ray Leonard, I guess Oscar De La Hoya was like similar in terms of height. Although I guess Oscar De La Hoya was 5'11", while Ray Leonard's like 5'9" to 5'10" or something. So I guess there's him, but I mean he wasn't as quick as Ray Leonard. The only guy I can think of who was close to Leonard's speed was Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao is also known as one of he's also known as being one of the fastest punchers in boxing history as well. But I think there's Manny's speed and Leonard's speed are a bit different. Manny's speed is that he's quicker at shortening his punches, like on the inside and stuff. While Leonard's different in that in terms of like long range shots and having the ability of throwing shots at a far range, whether it's with straight punches or hooks and uppercuts. I'd say he was a lot faster than Manny, so that's just my opinion. So that's why I guess it would be a bit of a not difficult fight to predict, but just overall like an interesting one, just because of the fact that neither guy's really faced anyone who's exactly similar to the opposite fighter, right? So that being said, let's talk about who would have won. Okay, so I think I made a poll about this a few weeks ago. I think it was, or maybe a few months ago. Actually, yeah, I think it was a few months ago I made this poll about who you guys think would win, and a lot of you actually picked Floyd Mayweather Jr. to win, and I can sort of understand that because, I guess Mayweather's a bit more popular than Sugar Ray Leonard, right? You know what I mean? Also, I guess they look at the defensive aspect and the, of Mayweather and the counterpunching ability, and also the fact that Mayweather was undefeated at 50-0, while Ray Leonard was sort of different. He was how do I say, like, he had 3 losses, right, and a draw as well. But at the same time, I wouldn't pay too much attention to that because losses are just, you can come back from losses and all that stuff. So, that's that. But anyway, let's talk about who I think would have won. Okay, so in terms of who I think would win, I think that Ray Leonard would have won, and I'll explain why, right? So I see this fight going the distance, I think, right? I don't know if I see Ray Leonard knocking out Mayweather. I think it's possible, considering Ray Leonard had some really, underrated power, right? Because a lot of people don't even realize that he was actually a really hard puncher back in the day, I mean, I think they just look at the Hagler fight and they're like, oh, he didn't knock out Marvin Hagler. Well, Marvin Hagler is known for having the best chin in welterweight history, right? I mean, this guy's chin was like made out of iron or something, right? I mean, I don't think he's been knocked out, Marvin Hagler, right? If I'm not mistaken, right? I mean, he had that good of a chin. Yeah, he'd never been knocked out. His only losses were to Ray Leonard, and he lost earlier in his career to Willie Monroe and Bobby Watts, but those were either majority decisions or unanimous decisions, right? And I guess he also had a draw or 2 draws in his career as well. But like I said, those were early in his career, and so yeah, I mean, there's no shame in not knocking out Marvin Hagler, but my point is that he did have power nonetheless. I mean, he knocked out Tommy Hearns, right? He made Roberto Duran quit in their second fight. and he knocked out Wilfred Benitez as well. Knocked out Dave Boy Green, and or Dave Green anyway, right? So I mean, he definitely had power, and I'd say he punches harder than Mayweather as well, because like I said, Mayweather's not the hardest puncher, in the welterweight division, especially in welterweight history, right? So that being said, I still think the fight would have gone the distance, and the reason I think that, I don't think Mayweather has necessarily like this great chin or whatever, so I'm not basing it off on that. I'm basing it off his defense and the fact that he was able to slip a lot of shots and counter well. And I do see Mayweather tagging Ray Leonard at times in this fight, but I don't think it's anything that Ray Leonard couldn't take. Because look, Hagler, Hearns, Benitez, and Duran, in my opinion, all punch harder than Mayweather, and they weren't able to knock Ray Leonard out. I know Hearns was able to knock down. I know Hearns was able to knock down Ray Leonard in their second fight, like twice or something, but that was those were different circumstances. That was at middleweight. That was sort of, that was somewhat towards the end of Leonard's career, and so I wouldn't put too much into that. But yeah, in terms of, this fight, like I said, I do see Mayweather having success maybe early on, and I do see it being a competitive fight, but I do think that, the aggression and the aggression and speed and power that Leonard would have brought to the table, I think Mayweather really would have struggled with that. So, yeah, I got Leonard in this fight. I think he wins a decision, and that's that. So, it's an interesting fight. I mean, obviously, right? Like I said, I know Mayweather's a good defensive fighter and stuff, but I think, like I said, the power, the speed, and the aggression that Ray Leonard would have brought to the table would have given Mayweather a whole lot of problems to deal with. So, I know that Mayweather's like known for being the best ever and stuff, or that's his slogan, right? But I've always seen that as just like a marketing gimmick more than anything, right? Because, I mean, I certainly don't see, when I look at Floyd Mayweather, I certainly don't see him as being the best ever, right? I mean, I'm not saying he's a bad fighter. He's certainly a good fighter. He's certainly a great fighter, but he's not, in my opinion, the best ever. Because let's be honest, I mean, he's had some hiccups along his career, right? And some, controversy as well. I mean, there were certain fighters that he fought who weren't really in their prime by the time he fought them. You know what I mean? He also had, a very, very close fight with Manny Pacquiao that could have gone either way. And he never really gave Manny Pacquiao the rematch, right? I mean, he got a terrible gift decision against Jose Luis Castillo, which is that's a fight that, people don't even like to talk about, right? It was the Castillo fight, right? So, it's like, I mean, let's just be honest. He hasn't had, he's not all, his career hasn't been all like, glamour and sunshine and rainbows, right? I mean, it's, he has had some controversy regardless of what you think of him, right? But, I mean, like I said, I know I have some probably Floyd Mayweather Jr. fans, who are subscribed to me. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm hating on Floyd, but I'm just saying that in terms of him being the best ever, I just think that's I don't know, just in my opinion, that's a bit of a false narrative. But I mean, I'm not saying Leonard's the best ever either, but I'm just saying styles make fights. I think Ray Leonard's style is automatically, or essentially, a bad one, or a bad matchup, for Floyd Mayweather Jr. But that's just my opinion, and that's that. So anyway, you guys let me know what you think. I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions on this fantasy fight in the comments below. And let me know what other fantasy fights you guys want me to talk about, and I'll be happy to make those videos. So that being said, hope you guys have a good day. Take care and peace.